Alright, this is an assembly video for a Nexus 8 hub. Let's start by clamping down the axle and let's go over all the components. So most of the parts go on and they can only go on in one way. The first piece to go on, you can see it's nicely asymmetric. It's got all of these things sticking out, so you will see there's really only one way it can fit. And that's this way. All right. The next piece, that's actually going to be three pieces. I'll show the piece first separately. So I'll take the bottom piece off first so you can better see what it's supposed to be doing. The next piece is actually going to be ultimately the piece that rotates and performs the shifting action, because that's the piece that is going to move this piece of metal here, or rotate that around the axle, and that's what moves the poles in and out. So it has a slit, and that slit fits over this piece of metal that's sticking out, and now when I rotate this, I'm basically performing the shifting. Okay, I'll take it back off. Put the original bottom piece back on. You can really go on in one way. This piece doesn't rotate. I could put this next piece back on, but I'm not going to, because it forms actually a three-part piece. The bottom part, the spring, and the top part. I'll show it to you without the top part, or without the spring, so this top part nicely fits in here. So this is a new piece, and that's why I also made this video, because in older videos there are actually two or three pieces that are now replaced by a single piece, and it's also differently shaped, and it engages the springs a little bit different, and the spring is also a little bit different. So I just wanted to show it. So there's a hole in the bottom, and the spring that we're going to install next has a little hook, a tab on it, and that's going to go in that hole. It's got another hole on the top end, and another spring, the second spring that we're going to insert, is going to insert a little hook in there. So and the spring is symmetric, so it doesn't matter, there's no orientation, you can do it this way, that way, it shouldn't matter. Goes into the bottom part. The bottom part has a little hook right there, and the spring should ultimately hook under there. So the spring is under tension, it won't fit right now, you have to compress it a little bit to work it in. So I'm gonna try and do that now. And that's a tricky part, so that's going to happen off camera where you can have more leverage. So it's in now, the spring, but you can see it's not quite hooked correctly yet. So there's a hook on the spring, and that has to go under there. So I'm going to, off camera again, push this a little bit counterclockwise so that it hooks under there. The end of the spring is properly hooked under there. Then I have my pre-assembled piece with the top part with these sort of rabbit ears sticking out on the top. It's hooked into the spring. The hole on the bottom is, the spring is hooked into that. I'm going to place it so that the metal piece in the bottom that's moving goes through the slot. And now I really have to tension this a little bit, about a quarter turn. And when it's tensioned, I can push it down further. Now when I release the tension, you will see it doesn't turn back that quarter turn. The next part is the hardest part, because it's a spring that is going to be under a lot of tension. So, and there are two ways that the spring is going to be seated wrong. So what's going to happen is the spring is going to go, and this spring does have an orientation. You'll see it has one end is sticking inward, the other end is sticking outward. The end that is sticking inward goes down, and that little hook on the spring, there is a little hole here, and the spring hooks into that hole. Let's do that. Yeah, all right, that's part of the spring is in. So it's going to misalign the spring in sort of two ways. At the bottom ring, it should first make a nice whole turn around the middle section. It has a tendency to slip over it too early, but that doesn't happen so often. The more problematic part is the top hook. So the top piece, on one side, it has a hook. And the spring has to go under that hook in the end. Often the spring misaligns because you hook it and then it tends to immediately pull inward, but it shouldn't immediately pull inward. It should go on the outside of this edge here. Okay, so after you hook this spring into the hole on the bottom, what you want to do is you want to turn it clockwise as far as you can. That puts all the components in the right place for the tensioning later. Then you're going to put on the top plate. And you have to position the top plate. You can do that in two ways. So it has a little hook. You have to do it in the way that in order for the spring to go under the hook, you would have to turn it about 3/4 of a turn. So I have it all set now. The spring hook is here. The top spring hook is there. So that has to hook under there. So it's going to have to go 3/4 of a turn. I'm going to grab it with a pair of pliers. And this often takes me many turn attempts. All right, that was a lot of tries, but I finally got the spring hooked up. So you can see it's all crooked so far yet, but we'll have to fix that. So here's what I was talking about. It always misaligns. So I've got it hooked correctly here, but then it goes under here and it should go over here. So I'm going to have to fix that. All right, well, the spring is finally on. I recommend not taking it off in the first place. It's just horrible to put it on. When it's on, there are these two tabs still sticking out. You should still be able to engage those turning counterclockwise. And you should feel nice resistance. And you should see balls opening and closing. And we can put on the next part. That's a part which function completely eludes me, but it's this part. It can really go on again in only one way. It has small notches and large notches. The small notches will fall over these sort of little rabbit ears that are going to be used to engage the mechanism. So I'll put it on. Small notches go over the little rabbit ears. And there you go. So this part has these little balls that can go in and out. And I don't know what they're supposed to hook up to, because in the end, the assembly will make these permanently closed, as you'll see. The next part is this one with the longer rabbit ears. It has little tabs on the bottom, and they should be placed so that they would engage the short rabbit ears of that part, so that now when you turn the long rabbit ears, again, you nicely turn the entire shifter and the balls go in and out. Next up is this part. It'll go on over the rabbit ears, and on the bottom these will sit next to these balls, and what will happen is as you turn this counterclockwise, they will actually close those. See? So they will move into a closed position. As soon as you put any tension on here, by rotating counterclockwise, these balls are closed. When you attach a shifting cable, there will be some tension attached. So they're always going to be closed. Moreover, we're now going to do the final component or the locking ring. It has stamped numbers. So the stamped numbers go up. Fits in only one way. You'll see that it kind of fits in 3 stages. First, you can only push it this far. You turn the assembly counterclockwise a little bit. You can now push it down further. Still not entirely to the bottom, because there's a next little hook to the rabbit ears. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to check focus. Yep. I'm going to turn the rabbit ears a little bit, and now the lock ring can go fully down. And you'll notice the lock ring actually also locks these balls in place. So I have no idea what they're for. They are never going to come out. Now we move on to the clutch. The clutch is going to go back on, and it's going to go back on the same way you pulled it out. It has little free floating tabs here at the bottom. So first, you can only get it on one way, and then you have to, right after it clears this first set of holes, you're going to turn it, let's see, clockwise, I think. Yep, about a quarter turn. And then you'll see another notch here. So it's going to go in this notch in the end. So you put it on here, turn it about a quarter clock to make sure the bottom they turn, and then it falls into these notches here. It's always going to be a little wobbly like this. So how do you test if you've done it right? Grab the rabbit ears and turn them counterclockwise, and about halfway through the motion you should see it drop. Yep, there it goes. And it comes back up. Down, up. So that is the correct movement. And that means we can put the next part on. That was this spring. It goes on with the wide part to the bottom. And it just rests inside the clutch ring. Next one to go on is this part. Okay, so there are large tabs and small tabs on the outside of the clutch, and they match large and small recesses inside this component. So, yep, there we go. It's over the clutch now. The manual says to turn it a little bit counterclockwise, and then it should kind of stay in place. Last two components. The ball bearing ring goes in with the flat metal side up, and then we have the lock nut. Can only go one way, so it's very hard to push in, and that's because you're supposed to hammer it in. And Shimano has this special tool, and they say you put it on there and you hammer it until it stops. I've done this now for 2 axles, and on one, if I hammer it in until it stops, it's too far and actually something dislodges in the inside. On another one, it doesn't go far enough. So instead, I'm going to use a different tool. I'm just going to use anything. This is like a brake removal, I think it's a disc brake removal tool. It can go over here, and you can also hammer it, because you're just supposed to hammer the lock nut, or you could use like a wrench and hit the wrench. And you want to make it go down exactly the right amount. And what is the right amount? I'll show you. I'm going to start hammering it down a little bit. So remember those rabbit ears that we are turning, they are supposed to, in the end, poke out about 1 millimeter above the lock nut. And I'm going to start tapping it until I start seeing the rabbit ears poking out. A bit further. So now, and I don't know, I'm sure that's going to be hard to see, but the rabbit ears are just about poking out above the lock nut here. And how do I know the exact right distance? I'm going to know that when I put on all of the components. So the next one to go on, and I still don't know if the sort of ring is supposed to be up or down. It has a groove. I'll do it with the groove up. This has little notches on the inside that fit over the rabbit ears. So they're now over the rabbit ears now. And then comes on the silver part with the two red dots. Can only go on in one way. All right. Now, and here's how I figure this ought to be aligned. Take them off again. You'll hear you have this final last black metal edge before you get to the threaded part. And I think the top of the silver is supposed to align exactly with the top of this black inner ledge. Because when that happens, then the rabbit ears are out exactly the right amount to be grabbed by this black ring. If you don't have them out enough, it's going to slip or not grab. Problem is, if you tap it in too far, there's going to be a ring next. Here, I'll show it. I'll put on this one over the rabbit ears. Put on the silver part. Okay, so the next part that would go on is this little black ring. And it has these two tiny tabs on the bottom. And the tiny tabs grab onto the silver ring. But they can only do that if this black part can go close enough to the silver ring. If you tap the silver ring down too far, then the black part is going to be stopped by this black inner edge at the very end of the screw thread. And then it can go down far enough. So that's why I think the silver part has to be exactly flush with the inner ledge. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just put the silver part on, and I'm going to tap the silver part a little bit more until it is nicely flush with the black edge. If we take it apart, you should now see, there we go. There's the little rabbit ear. It's sticking out about 1 millimeter. If I put on the black ring that is supposed to grab on, the top of the rabbit ears is just about flush with the black ring, so that seems right. I can put the silver ring on, and I can put this black ring on, and the black ring nicely grabs the silver ring. And the final part that goes on is the lock nut. Make sure before final tightening that this black thin ring is properly hooked into the silver component. And tighten it. All right, that nearly completes assembly. I'll finish assembly just to show how. Turn it around. First this ball bearing ring goes on, and then this part goes on. Inside there's a little tab, and there's a continuous groove here. This groove here. And the tab should go over that groove. And then you kind of just turn it until it completely goes down. Yep. There you go. Now there was that locking ring. There we go. And that completes the reassembly.